stream. It's going to be Grant Manley going up against Matthew Wood. Talking about players that are so close to closing something out in recent times. Grant Manley coming off a really fantastic run at LASE.
Yeah, third place to close things out there. Of course, very impressive to see Grant Manley almost closing out that international championship. Just a little bit short, playing up against Tord Reckliff and that Stoutland V just doing a little too much work. But Grant is not going to go away this time. He's going to be playing that Lost Zone one more time and has some interesting techs lined up.
Not the only one with interesting text, though. Sitting across from Grant is going to be Matthew Wood. Not as many accomplishments under his name, but instead a known content creator, definitely not new to the game whatsoever, and playing a Lugia, but a little bit of a modified version.
Yeah, Little Dark Fury bringing the horror energy in there. That's a little bit scary when you're playing this Lugia deck, but sure enough, that means that we have some exciting tech cards to be played here. We'll let you take a guess at what those are. Maybe they'll reveal themselves soon.
I feel like that's really going to be a mainstay of this weekend too. Coming off of a competition where Lugia was just so dominant is how you can make sure that you're set up against it. You don't want to be coming in here. If you're playing Lugia, you don't want to be taking that loss in the mirror because you flipped tails and weren't able to quite go first. That's always pretty rough. Getting into the game though, really ideal start for both players. We're going to see the Lugia on Matthew's side going up against the Comfy on Grant's.
Yeah, of course, Matthew would have loved to go first here. Having that Lugia down looks very strong, but going to be staring off at the side for Grant, starting off with that quick ball. And you love to see that opening for the Comfey. Means that we probably could see a pretty strong opener here for Grant.
Yeah, managed to get another Comfy, eyeing up that Radiant Greninja. Getting the Comfies, you can obviously swap and have that Flower Selecting and the Greninja. Being able to make sure that you can just discard energy and consistently get cards to help you get set up.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Grant starts working towards with the rest of this. Of course, going to be making a lot of choices here with Flower Selecting, trying to get lined up against Lugia, a deck that he is very familiar with. And we do see some interesting inclusions now. This list will be featuring the Zekrom that has an opportunity to use Paralysis to really lay an impact on these Lugia builds.
Yeah, that paralysis and just the fact that there's not as many swapping options can definitely be really strong. Not too surprised, the Radiant Greninja going to be benched and the energy right away to be able to draw more. And the Flower Selecting, a lot easier of a choice this time around. Last weekend, we got to see that the Flower Selectings for Grant weren't necessarily on his side.
Yeah, you can see even the decision between a Quick Ball and a Lightning Energy is still going to be something to think about because you do have limited numbers here. You want to make sure that you have those Lightning Energies to eventually work in some knockouts towards this Lugia, and that's, you can see it's already going to be a tough choice. There goes one Lightning, and we know there are still at least 3 more that could be used.
And now with that Quick Ball grabbed, just eyeing up what needs to be discarded here. Of course, with the escape ropes, that can be so good in making sure you have content swaps to your bench. I'm going to be keeping that in hand. Instead, looks like getting rid of that Colorless Experiment.
Yeah, this is terrifying for your opponent to look over on the other side and say, he's throwing away Colress's Experiment. What in the world is in that hand? And do I even want to find out at this point?
Especially with Colorless Experiment, of course, you can't play it this turn, but such a strong way to make sure that you get cards that you need into your hand, but throwing things into the Lost Zone to really be able to do what this deck is designed to do. Scoop up, and it's going to be Comfy going back into the active. Another Flower Selecting, another big decision to be made.
Yeah, we see that Bird Keeper now with inclusion that Grant is going to feature just as many switching options as possible as you see an escape rope come down as well. And these Comfies are going to be used very often already with 3 cards into the Lost Zone here.
And in the turn with a benched Cramorant, and now it's going to go over to Matthew's side. At least managing to have the Lugia out on the field is certainly nice. Yes, you go second, but having the Lugia, you don't have to quite go searching for it, and instead can start setting up in other ways, like this Evolution Incense, surely to grab an Archeops.
Yeah, it feels weird playing an Evolution Instance to start things off on the first turn, but of course this is to find that Archeops and get that into the discard pile as early as possible. And I think we've shown the surprise there. You see an arm, a leg, a wing, a thigh. That is the Mewtwo V Union trying to get into play here. And boy, would that be something.
Definitely expected a couple of spicy things this weekend, but I didn't think we were going to be reaching that far and bringing out the V Union Pokemon. But honestly, he seems pretty cute, and even checking out Matthew's Twitter, has won games in the previous round. So I'm really intrigued to see if it will make an appearance this time around. Was the Archeops grabbed, and looks like potentially an Ultra Ball on Matthew's mind. Just thinking about it, not quite sure, but there we go.
Yeah, so many ways to discard these Archeops into the discard pile to get these Mewtwo V Union pieces into the discard pile as well. And I'm interested to see if the strategy still is going to be the classic Lugia build, just get these Archeops and get them into the discard and then worry about that Mewtwo, or do you start trying to grab pieces at one of these times here?
Yeah, of course, you need to be discarding the Mewtwo V Union pieces, but you have to make sure along with this that you are getting your Lugia set up. It is the mainstay of the deck, of course, so it will be a quick ball to get rid of the other Archeops.
We see the Crobat and the Lumineon that are going to be featured in this list. So, of course, if you can use these ways to thin down the hand, you can draw into some of those Mewtwo V Union pieces. And sure enough, we are going to see that Lumineon featured now.
Minion, I mean, such a strong ability here, being able to go grab and search for a supporter card, but not even go for that. Instead, it will be the Professor Burnett. This is one of the things that can be used to get those pieces into the discard, and look what I'm seeing.
Yeah, 2 pieces already down here, and that is exactly where Matthew wants to be. Just you like to know where those are, and you start thinking about the strategy. And having 310 hit points and being able to potentially endure so many of these shots from the Lost Box deck. The reach, as far as single attacks for Grant's deck, really doesn't go that high. We see Cramorant doing 110 damage. If you can just keep healing that off with the Mewtwo V Union over and over again, you can see a world where Matthew just isn't going to be intimidated.
Yeah, it does take a little bit to get it set up, but honestly, pretty good first turn one as well. Going to be benching off that Lugia V to end things off, just to make sure no shenanigans, that there can be that evolution to a VMAX next turn. Passing over to Grant, though, it will be the Culver's experiment to get 2 more into that lost zone, and now we're sitting at 5.
Yeah, the Battle VIP pass, a lovely discard there. Just get that as far away from your hand as possible, and certainly going to be holding on to plenty of those energies, as this is really where the resource managing comes into play here for Grant. Going to make sure to discard the right energies, and sometimes those are energies that you want to see because you want to know where they are. You can find them in the discard pile and not have to make awkward choices later on.
And here's potentially one. You can see the Hisuian Heavy Ball as well as that Manaphy. Grant with a decision to make. You want to make sure nothing on the bench sniped, but as well being able to grab a Pokemon from the prizes with that Hisuian Ball is so strong, and it's going to opt to be putting that in hand.
It's nice to see that as an option here. We could maybe take a look at those prize cards and see what Grant could potentially be reaching for here, as he probably has a lot of information already, has been through the deck quite a few times, but maybe that one Pokemon to help out could be in the prize cards.
There it is. And at least 2, you get that solid information, and it will be a Sableye to grab out, make sure that you have the attackers necessary. I mean, that resource management, as you're talking about, the energy is so important, but you want to make sure as well you have those attackers you be following up with. Yeah,
we're not too far away from Lost Mine. It isn't exactly where you want to go in a strategy where you're looking at 2 Lugias that could potentially be V-Stars next turn, but you do have to start taking prize cards and lining up the math so that a Zekrom could eventually start knocking these Pokemon out, and not having to worry about a choice belt is something that's fantastic.
For sure. Here it is, capture energy, going on to the active comp feed to be able to search out a basic Pokemon from deck, and that Oranguru is the one that's going to be benched.
Yeah, this is such a great card to see. It means that Grant has an opportunity to make sure that if using Flower Selecting, he could see a card that he's not worried about throwing into the Lost Zone, and just make sure that the consistency off the top of the deck is always going to be beneficial here.
Sure, you always know what's coming next. You're not going to be surprised by that top deck, and a chance to refresh with a little bit of what's in your hand to just try and grab something new with the retreat, manual retreat there, energy to the discard. Make sure that Cramorant can go in the active for a spit innocently. Of course, because of that lost provisions, don't need any energy to be able to do that 110 attack.
It's a nice way to start things off here. Second turn, get some damage onto that Lugia. Put a little bit of a threat there, but mainly just looking to see what Matthew can get going on this turn. 2 Lugias, not exactly where you want to be, but of course, just playing safely at this point. Didn't want to be surprised by anything wild. And now we're going to see if that Lumineon can help out here, because we need a lot of cards to get going. At least the Lugia V-Star, but if you could start seeing that Mewtwo V Union, that would be very nice.
Yeah, Lugia already being a deck that has some sort of setup element to it, and taking that a step further with the Mewtwo V Union definitely has a little bit of distance to be going, but grabbing this Professor Research off the Lumineon, that'll be really nice to be able to get some new cards in the hand.
We see the 1 energy down. That means that once the Archeops eventually are found by way of Summoning Star, you don't need too much to get the knockouts here. A double turbo energy and just any other energy accelerated from the deck will be able to knock out this Cramorant and start applying some pressure here. And we are going to see at least some prize cards if we see a Lugia V-Star come out.
And Professor's research being played, fresh, brand new 7 cards in hand to be able to try and go for. Lugia V-Star being one of them, can evolve that active into that to have access now to that Summoning Star, and of course, going to play it for the 2 Archeops.
Yeah, this is so clean. Just get those down as early as possible. The deck has plenty of ways to get the Archeops into the discard pile, and sure enough, Matthew did exactly what he needed to do, getting those down, and we are going to see the energy acceleration now. And this is where we really get a good feel for the energies and the resource managing here, as we do see a card like that V-Guard energy. It's something that's not very necessary in a matchup like this. Not going to be too worried about Vs on the other side, as there are 0. So just get that down and at least have the energy fulfillment needed to take a knockout.
Yeah, and the only one being used, you can now start to set something else up, as we see that it will be a second Archeops being used here. Get everything set up while you can. Make sure that you are set. So if anything weird happens to your Lugia V-Star, that you are set up for the next turn to try and make sure you can stay ahead or at least stay even with this prize trade.
In this matchup, we so often look to see where the powerful energies are so that a card like a Stoutland V could come down and start taking double knockouts here on these low hit point Pokemon. But that's not going to be the case this time around. We are not going to see that featured, and understandably so. When you try to fit all 4 pieces of a Mewtwo V Union into your deck, you have to make some sacrifices.
The Stoutland V, it's a pretty cheeky card, but you can't get too crazy with these lists, or you're going to be sacrificing a lot of this consistency that you want to try and strive for. Since if you can't get set up with this, you are basically done. It will be a powerful and an Aurora from that Primal Terminal to the Lugia on the bench, though.
Yeah, we actually see 2 V-Guard energies featured in this list, so Matthew's certainly thinking about potentially the Lugia mirror match, and why would you do that? But
right. I've never seen a Lugia mirror match before. I don't know what you're talking about. We'll take that KO for turn with the Lugia V-Star, take 1 prize, and Radiant Greninja making its way to the active slot for Grant. 6 in the lost zone, so getting close to that magic 10 where things can start getting rounded out. And what a nice Colors Experiment. 2 battle VIP pass to go in the lost zone. Amazing.
Easiest decision of his life,
right?
Going to get all of those into the lost zone. So that Mirage Gate is open now, and we see it being used already, and that definitely leans towards this Radiant Greninja getting aggressive here and potentially lighting up with this Moonlight Shuriken here.
Yeah, nothing on Matthew's side to prevent any sort of bench sniping, so this Radiant Greninja can definitely be putting in that distance. And Mirage Gate, I mean, it's such a strong card, being able to be activated once there's 7 in the lost zone. Great way to be energy accelerating, and just has the 1 in hand, but gonna go and just draw more instead.
Yeah, I was looking through the list and I got a little worried as we saw that the Clara is no longer featured for Grant. That was a great way to find the right energies at the right time. But sure enough, has that water energy in the hand, actually the last energy in hand it looks like. And that's going to be exactly enough to get this Moonlight Shuriken rolling. Now we're going to get a good feel for the strategy. Do you want to start targeting these V Pokemon and take multiple prize cards, line up some knockouts with the Sableye, or do you go for the heart of the deck and start working on the Archeops, maybe lining up a double knockout with a Sableye, as the math lines up pretty cleanly there.
Yeah, it's all where you want to be targeting. With the Sableye coming down onto the bench, that could give a little bit of way to of how you want things to go. There it is. It will be the Radiant Greninja attacking, though, and it's going to be 90 on both of the Archeops here.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. This is such a strong play. It just lines up so smoothly with the Sableye, as both Pokemon are now 60 hit points away from being knocked out. Sableye deals 12 damage counters, and if you've been to 2nd grade, you know that's a knockout.
Some basic math. Make it all easy peasy, and that being the main acceleration for the deck, of course, being able to get rid of those is certainly nice. There's still quite a bit of energy over on Matthew's side to be playing around with. 1 from hand, going to go to that Lugia V on the bench.
And we see that Matthew's really just going to try to go with this consistent strategy of get these energies down and start attacking with Lugia. And it's okay for now. It's going to continue to keep him in the prize exchange, but ultimately you can see a world where Grant's just going to start pulling away. The damage is going to be overwhelming, and when you're surrendering 2 prize cards to your opponent's 1 over and over again, especially when you line up into lightning weakness maybe in the future. It's just not going to work out here. We're going to have to see a change in strategy and maybe see some Mewtwo V Union pieces, but they're just not falling in the hand right now.
And that's the tricky thing, too, with having these Lugia Vs to attack, is that this prize trade might not be the most favored for you. Some of these lists instead opt for those one prize attackers, and instead having things that give up so many prizes, you can definitely find yourself on the back foot really, really quickly here.
Well, Matthew's trying everything he can at this point just to keep going. I don't think that the hand is being too helpful. We do see the Manaphy a turn late. That is not going to be impactful against a card like Sableye. Those are damage counters being placed, not damage being dealt.
That's the tough part of it all. Get a couple more cards in hand in this position. Evolve the other Lugia up to this Lugia V-Star. Attacking with these two Prizers, definitely a hurtful thing. And there we go. Just get more energy onto it. It will be a Primal Turbo being used.
It didn't even think about the Serena as a potential way to discard as well. But sure enough, we see that Matthew's going to be leaning towards a heavier line of the Serena in this deck to potentially just have that opportunity there to go ahead and get those cards into the discard pile. But yet again, we see that the discard just not featuring any Mewtwo pieces.
Especially at this point, too, with a full bench. I mean, even if you do get everything going together, you're kind of still in a rough spot.
Yeah, we can see a world where the Archeops will not be around next turn, and even if you get Mewtwo V Union, you're going to have to attack to get those energies accelerated. And it doesn't feel the best, but I guess you'd like to have energy cards, so you do what you can.
The energy, you need it so bad, and not having that acceleration potentially after next turn definitely hurts. It will be a KO onto that active Radiant Greninja, another prize over on Matthew's end. So you see Comfey for Grant being pushed to the active.
Well, just one Psychic Energy in the discard pile here. Grant definitely going to be looking for another one. 3 are featured in the list, so maybe a little bit of digging could help out in a spot like this. Want to be featuring that Sableye as often as possible. We do see the Ordinary Rod, so maybe a little bit of a thought process here and how you want to order this. And wow, finding that Colress's Experiment is a great way to find the cards you need.
Exactly. Being able to just have the option of 5 that you draw in which you want to be putting to your hand. We see it put to the front of his hand, so definitely consideration here as that energy with the Sableye. The last thing you want to do is whiff that energy and all of a sudden not be able to take out the bench Archeops, giving Matthew the potential other turn to be going forward. Energy drawn, but instead it will be the Lightning.
Yeah, well, it does find that Mirage Gate, so even then, that will be a way that you can get these energies back. We see multiple ways to get the Psychic Energy back as well, so going to be featuring those. Looks like the Recycler could be held onto, and I like that. Just having the opportunity to be able to get these energies when you need them at the end to close out, just make sure that you're sticking to that consistent strategy. And, ooh, actually wants to switch it up here and go for the Snorlax. That's an interesting call. Just might be worried about having the Pokemon to close out now.
That's the thing. The energy is not really going to do you much good if you don't have the Pokemon to be able to attach to, and all of a sudden you have, I guess, only the Comfeys that are active on the board to really do anything with. So opting to keep the Snorlax instead, scoop up net to get the other Comfey in the active, go for another flower selecting at this point. Very fast decision there. Let's get rid of that Pokestop.
Yeah, easiest choice of his life. Going to have that Zekrom now to take a potential 2 prize cards. The Snorlax would love to take 2 prize cards as well, and it makes so much sense. You see that Manaphy down. It means that the Kyogre is not going to be a Pokemon that you feature at this point. Radiant Greninja's already been used here, so that's also potentially going to be added back in. Just a way to help out. Yeah, it looks like all these Pokemon are going to jump back in, and we will see the Mirage Gate to get that Psychic Energy moving. And look how thin the deck is at this point. Grant has been rolling to get to this point, and we're on what, turn 3? This is ridiculous.
And look how many cards are in his hand as well. Truly has every piece that he needs to be playing around with. Sure, maybe the Psychic Energy isn't quite there, but with the capability of grabbing it with the Mirage Gate, knowing now that you have it in the discard thanks to that Ordinary Rod, is just so nice. And I'm really excited to see the Raikou coming out, considering that this was, or the Zekrom, sorry, coming out. This should be a great new Pokemon being added to this Lost Box, but with that Wild Shock attack, you do so much damage as well as the paralysis.
Yeah, it's so nice to feature a card like this in this deck, just because you're not really concerned about how much damage you're doing. Being able to take the knockout can be nice, but ultimately, if you leave the damage on board, Sableye will help you clean that up very easily.
Up. Switch cart just to bring this Sableye on forward. Make sure you have over 10 of the lost zone at this point, so you can be putting those damage counters down to make sure these Archeops are taken care of, and there's not going to be too many Mewtwo shenanigans happening in the future. It's not quite yet, though. Going to make sure to take advantage of that Primeate Wisdom. Make sure the top deck is exactly what you need before taking rid of those birds.
Yeah, valuing the Ordinary Rod, which makes a lot of sense here. The Comfies are going to be able to help you accelerate through and find the Pokemon that you need if they are knocked out. And if Matthew is able to find the one-of boss to target down the Zekrom, you could still be able to bring that back on the following turn.
Yeah, Zekrom deals so much damage to these Lugias. But if that can just be taken care of, then it'll be back to Sableye just having to drop down these damage counters. And definitely could be a way to make sure that these attackers in these Lugia V-Stars stick around for just a little bit longer.
You can see the math starting to line up. If Sableye is able to get another attack off, it could maybe knock out the Manaphy and get some damage onto the Lugia. Of course, you see that the prize count is at 4, so then you start wondering, well, can we get the V knockouts in a spot like this? And it looks like if Snorlax were to find the choice belt, take a knockout on the Lugia, and then have that Zekrom to clean up, maybe that would be a way to get the job done here.
Lugia V bench with powerful energy as well as an Ultra Ball. Get a chance to scope out what's still in the deck and grab what I believe is the last piece of this Mewtwo V Union.
Yeah, we see it's slowly coming together. There's so much else going on the board, though. It's if you could get this Pokemon out, and you could also see a world where Grant says, I don't care about that. I'm just going to put damage on the bench and figure it out.
That's the thing with the Sableye, just being able to spread those damage counters around. Sure, Mewtwo v Union, it has some cheeky things like being able to just heal the damage, but if everything else on your bench is just being targeted at that point with those damage counters drops, not going to do much. Professor Research, pitch that Mewtwo leg, and get 7 in hand.
Yep, and there is the 4th piece, so this was missing, but sure enough, has the quick ball there. So we are going to see all 4 pieces into the discard pile most likely this turn, and then it's decision time. We already have seen an energy place for the turn, though, so you likely would think that this would come out on the following turn.
Yeah, no rush to put it out quite yet, potentially. And the choice belt from hand, going to go onto the Lugia V-Star that is on the bench. Just the quick ball, but a fail. I mean, the only reason you necessarily needed that was to get that Mewtwo piece in the discard. There's nothing you really need to be grabbing.
Well, this lines up nice for Matthew to start taking a prize lead at this stage. It doesn't feel great when you have the damage on your Lugia right now, but at least you can see the strategy coming together. The Mewtwo pieces are in the discard pile. I'm worried about the energy count. You're going to need at least 1 more if you want to start to accelerate the energies onto the Mewtwo V Union and get the ball rolling that way, but we will see if those are found.
It's a thing. There's already so many energy on board and a couple discarded to get to this point. You have to make sure that you have enough steam in your deck to be able to keep rolling. And Grant going to be able to check out that discard pile to see too. Doesn't actually look like too many special energies in there, though.
Yep, see at least 2 Aurora energies, it looks like. So a little bit was pitched along the way.
Lugia V-Star in the active. I feel like, too, it's so weird for these Lugia decks to see so much attacking power with just the Lugias. It's the Summoning Star, yeah, you have the ability to be going for the attack, but there's a couple of different ways you can be attacking with the decks, and seeing the fact that there's 3 Lugias down is kind of weird.
I love this right here. This is perfect. The Luminion is going to use Aqua Return for a knockout here, and that means you also know where some energies are, so potentially could find those next turn. If they eventually make their way onto that Mewtwo V Union, then you could see that strategy come to fruition. I guess the choice now is who do you promote, and the 1 prizer in Manaphy does look interesting, although you also start to wonder if you can promote somebody with a retreat already lined up. That'd be nice too.
So there definitely is a couple of different Lugias that can be thrown into the active for that slot, and having at least a couple of more in the deck, the energies as well as the minions, really nice. Finally going to be able to grab that prize card now, grabbing a Marnie off of that. Made me worried for a second that was being missed, but it will be the damaged Lugia V-Star that's going into the active for this turn, being passed over to Grant now. To see, it will be a Comfy promoted in this spot.
Yeah, just going to continue with this trend of seeing as many cards as possible. And that's exactly what you want to do here. Just give yourself plenty of options to close out this stage. Your opponent basically just sacrificing 2 prize cards to you with this promotion to the Lugia V-Star has to feel pretty comfortable. And then you start to wonder, how do you map this out? Can you work in the Snorlax in a spot like this to take a knockout and save the Zekrom?
Yeah, the Zekrom definitely deals a nice amount of damage, but you don't want to be all of a sudden losing that late game sweep, that potential that you have with that. And sure enough, it will be the Snorlax that goes down on the bench, as well as that capture energy to make sure that this Radiant Greninja can be pulled from deck.
Yep, the Radiant Greninja will be able to continue to help look through the deck at possible times with that concealed cards. We know that the deck is getting pretty thin at this point, but yeah, that's actually going to be just the last 2 energies in the deck and 1 card left. Snorlax dealing 180 damage is going to line up beautifully here against the Lugia V-Star, and Grant is going to flood the deck with energies at this point.
Yeah, you don't want to be losing on a deck out as well. Having the energy recycler and having the option to just throw all these energies back in and potentially have a different late game sweep potential is super, super nice, and definitely has the 5 energies in deck and discard to be able to throw them all back.
We see the Choice Belt still in hand. I think 2 of them are still available for the Zekrom to potentially close out against the Lugia, which is fantastic here in this spot. Just being able to conserve these resources and have the opportunity to take that big knockout at the end of things, it just puts even more pressure on Matthew to find the right cards to avoid a knockout. And even then, you're not dealing with the Snorlax threat.
Yeah, and you can see exactly where Grant's mind's at too, with going and using that Mirage Gate and throwing 2 of those energies onto that Snorlax to get that all powered up. Radiant Greninja, that will be the switch card to promote the Snorlax into the active now.
Yeah, this is lining up pretty beautifully here. Grant is basically going to have access to all of the cards in his deck next turn to close things out, and I'm excited to see what Matthew has in store, because it's you're going to be asking a lot, and I think it involves Mewtwo v Union.
Even if it's at a point where Grant's just a little too far ahead, being able to see a Mewtwo v Union be all thrown onto the board is definitely a fun time. That'll be a KO taken from the Snorlax at this point, but Grant's being scooped up just in recognizing that, hey, this ain't going my way. I'm going to go on to the next.
Yeah, that was not what Matthew wanted to see. It's just basically checkmate was lined up as early as turn 3, that big turn 4 that we saw for Grant. Basically just had that Zekrom ready to roll and never really even had to attack with it. It was a perfect setup there. Found the right way to close out against this deck by targeting the Archeops, and I'm excited to see if that's going to be the strategy going forward, or maybe Matthew plays that Manaphy down a little earlier and says, I'm never letting you do that again.
Yeah, losing the birds in this matchup definitely hurt, and it also just seemed like it hurt a little bit that you are using these Lugias to be consistently attacking, because sure, they do such a good amount, but then you're being put in this checkmate position because you're just giving up so many prizes with them in comparison to some of the other attackers, and maybe just a downfall of this Mewtwo v Union list that you kind of sacrifice a couple of the different attackers to be able to run it in this fashion. Yeah,
we're so used to seeing the Lugia decks featuring so many of those single prize Pokemon. Looking through the list, it is all Lugia. It is Luminion, Crobat V Max, ooh, and the Mewtwo v Union. There's no other Pokemon that isn't a V that's featured in this spot. So it's basically how things work in this spot. You're going to lose a prize card like that Manaphy, hopefully play a 7-prize game, and leave a Mewtwo v Union in the active spot with 1 prize to go and try to get the job done.
Yeah, and just the fact that you couldn't be only losing that Manaphy this time around with forcing Grant to take care of it definitely hurt with just how late it was, because there was just so many ways, okay, I'm just not even going to bother for it at this point. It's down a little too late. The Sableye is going to be able to clean this up. I'd love to see if there's a world now with Matthew being able to play and assumingly going first, that we could see a little bit more of acceleration and get that chance to get that Mewtwo v Union into play, because that would be really fun to see.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that Matthew was a little unlucky after the Archeops opener. Just in those following turns after getting down the Lugia and getting everything rolling, just wasn't able to find any pieces to the Mewtwo v Union until it was way too late.
Yeah, and at that point, your Archeops are gone. Your energies are already all committed into these Lugias. It's kind of, okay, you just got to go with the cards that you were dealt at this point and try and make sure that Grant just doesn't have this response and retaliation. Shuffling enough that we did get a little peek of Grant's prizes, though, already.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if that plays a role here. I actually didn't get to jump in and take a peek at that, but
Oh,
yeah.
well, there's 3 energy in there.
Okay.
So, I mean, as soon as you're able to grab them with taking prizes, it's good. But the energy, I'm gonna pause on the energy because look what's in the prizes over on Matthew's end.
Yeah, at the top of the prize cards, a Mewtwo V Union piece is very unfortunate. And I don't think we see a way to look through the prize cards featured in this list. So, Matthew, on this opening search, going to be a sad lad.
Yeah, at least he's starting with the Lugia V though, so it could be worse. You could be starting with Lumineon and then having a part of your Mewtwo prize. So Evolution Incense, of course, to grab the Archeops, perfect fodder for any Ultra Ball or Quick Ball, and we'll see that Ultra Ball come out to play. Also going to get rid of one of the guard energies.
We see that Archeops falling. So important to get those down early and just know where those are. And it looks like Matthew still has a little more play in this hand, at least for next turn. We do see that Aurora energy that could be used here to get that Archeops into the discard pile this turn. And just having a way to get all these Pokemon down and not worry about your opponent throwing down a Marnie or doing something to your hand, that's just something that's so rewarding in this game. Just get it out of the way so you don't have to worry.
Yeah, it always hurts when you see that the Lugia player can't quite get that Lugia down or only is able to get one Archeops into the discard, because then you have to start making those difficult choices of, do I go for the Summoning Star with only one bird? Because at one point, some energy acceleration is better than no energy acceleration. It
is terrifying to be in a spot like that because we've seen that Grant has the reach to take knockouts on that Pokemon, and it could be as easy as a Zekrom targeting that down, and then there goes all of your energy acceleration.
Yeah, and at least the Manaphy in hand, so we know that Matthew has the access to it for later on, but of course not going to be benched quite in the spot. Make sure nothing bad happens to it. Passed over to Grant. It will be that Hisuian Heavy Ball to take a look at these prizes, and perfect. There's a Comfy right there for Grant to grab and throw right onto the bench.
And one of all of your basic energies featured. Not as perfect, but we do love seeing that Comfy. And yeah, that's one of the benefits there of playing the Hisuian Heavy Ball, just being able to have the reach to go in and find those cards. And I mean, there's an avenue where the game could be won here. It's not potentially likely, as we see that the Colress experiment is a great way to start things off. But if you could Mirage Gate onto a Zekrom, you could knock this thing out. We're talking about 7 in the discard pile, which is a lot of Comfy.
But at least having the Colress experiments and be able to play it down this turn is a way to get 2 in the Lost Zone. So start making an advancement towards that. That's always nice to be able to see that you can get resources into there right away. Maybe the Zekrom's a bit of a stretch, but
well, we'll see, because double battle VIP pass is found along with the escape rope. This list does play 3 escape ropes, so definitely looking to get these Pokemon into the active spot as often as possible to look at as many cards as he can. And you don't see this deck often starting with double battle VIP pass, but going to flood the board. But I think Grant is showing his hand a little bit here and taking a slower approach here with the Cramorant. Must feel comfortable in this matchup.
Yeah, if it was another Comfy, then we could see maybe hey, I have the potential to just win this game right here. But Cramorant, definitely a lot safer of a bet here. Make sure that you have the capability of being able to deal some damage once you have that 4 in hand. Here we go. Discard an energy, grab 2 more cards. Zekrom is in hand, though, for Grant.
It's always nice to know where that Pokemon is, along with the Lightning energy. If you're able to keep that in hand, then you don't have to really worry about having like a double Mirage Gate turn. You need those 2 Lightning energies to provide the full cost of the attack, and it's great to just know that that's going to be there for the turn that's necessary.
Yeah, Comfy is going to be benched for that final spot with Escape Rope coming out to put it right into the active right away to start going for our selecting. And now at this point, I believe we do have 4 in the Lost Zone, so that Cramorant on bench will be able to attack to just start dealing some damage this turn.
I mean, there's another scoop up net. There was reach. It probably wasn't ideal, but yeah, this seems a lot cleaner here. Just go ahead, use the Cramorant, spit innocently on that Lugia, and wait for the answer, and the answer is going to be a Lugia V-Star, it looks like.
Certainly a sigh of relief from Matthews, and just keeping one Pokemon out while your opponent's playing down all these cards, definitely a little bit of a scary spot to be in, but getting by with just a bit of damage done and being able to evolve. Now, Marnie, make sure that this hand that Grant was building upon doesn't get too out of control.
Looks like Grant was saved there, finding a Colress's experiment off of the Marnie, so We're not invited to her party this time around.
Shame, shame. But Matthew being able to grab a Lugia off of that Marnie is going to go ahead and bench that. And considering there was the Archeops that was discarded that first turn around, that summoning start to throw them right onto the bench and start loading up those energies.
You love to see that. And of course, Matthew would love to be accelerating these energies to a Pokemon like that Mewtwo VMAX or V Union. And we have not seen any of those cards, have we?
I mean, at this point, too, I'm sure the first thing Matthew did was go for the normal deck check at the beginning, and considering it's just a one of each of those cards, checking through, no reason to try and pitch them if the last piece is stuck in your prizes, or else you're going to be spending these resources on pretty much nothing, or just hoping that you finally draw that out. So it is just going to be a Lugia-style game, and it's going to be the double Primal Turbo to attach the special energies.
Yeah, I was a little worried seeing the 3 energies onto the Lugia V-Star here on the active. I don't know if Matthew's just planning to attach from hand to get that 4th energy down, but generally you do see that double turbo come down onto the active here.
Might have one in hand since that Aurora that's on the active Lugia was attached during the first turn, so still has the chance just to make sure you can attach from hand. Yeah, these Lugia decks set up so fast with throwing the energies with the ability, but we are allowed still to attach 1 per turn. We just have to wait to see if he has it in hand, but I'm assuming with the 2-0 in the tournament so far, that must have access to it, right?
You would hope so.
I hope so, right?
Of course, Marnie can give and Marnie can take away, but it looks like there is 2 options here in the hands, and Matthew is going to be playing down that capture energy. And you still need to shuffle afterwards, but I guess they're going to consider that previous shuffle enough. No. Okay, good job.
Shuffle just a little bit more. Make sure all the bits and pieces are in order here. Make sure that we're all good and nothing funky is going to be happening. As that energy attach, sure, you have the option to go for a basic, but not necessarily really needing one at this moment. Just going to go ahead and take first prize off of Grant.
Yep, and for Matthew, it's important to be taking prize cards early. You need to be taking a prize card every single turn after turn 1. So turn 2 here, taking a big knockout and trying to find some pieces to help out. Mewtwo V Union would have been excellent, but unfortunately, every single prize card is going to not be that one if he's drawing in the right order until the very end of the game.
Ordinary Rod over on Grant's side, just 2 energies from the discard, but at least a chance to reshuffle the deck. That Zekrom that could be putting in this damage against the Lugia was thrown to the bottom with the Marnie, so a nice chance to have the opportunity to draw into it, the Flower Selecting now.
Yep, once more, we do not see the Manaphy again, and this is a spot that Grant loved in the opener, and we could very well see the exact same strategy as in game number 1. That's where we saw the spit innocently onto the active. The knockout was lined up for a Snorlax, but if you have the cards to attack an Archeops, go for it.
The Primate is dumb. Throw the Battle of VIP Pass to the front, and that's going to be the easiest decision of your life with that Flower Selecting, and put just the energy into hand, and that energy will allow just a little bit more card draw off of this Ninja here. We'll have to see if we want to get the Mirage Gate to try and go for the cheeky Radiant Greninja play like the first time around. Going to need 7 in the Lost Zone, but that course experiment will do it.
Yeah, absolutely huge to have these cards available. This is not the best decision. We see multiple choice belts in the decision here for the Culver's Experiment. And I think a Mirage Gate as well.
Considering you need to be able to get those energies onto the Radiant Greninja to put Matthew in that same tricky position in game 1 with these Archeops being so damaged. You don't want to be pitching that. You want to make sure that can go to hand. So it is just going to be the 2 choice belts into that Lost Zone.
Yeah, that means that the Zekrom will not be taking a one-hit knockout unless the damage is already placed on the Lugia at this point. And I think that just speaks to the strategy for Grant. He felt very comfortable going aggressively after the Archeops, and the water energy in hand now definitely signals that that's a viable option too.
Another option now, or at least in coming turns, is this Snorlax was grabbed off of the Quick Ball, and now Mirage Gate, since there is 7 in the Lost Zone, can go ahead and grab 2 basic energies of different types and go ahead and attach them onto the Pokemon. Quick acceleration, and either go for the Archeops play or go for the KO with the Snorlax.
Yep, this is a little tougher than last time, I suppose. There's a little more aggression being brought on from Matthew this time, so certainly understandable to be aggressive here and work in that Snorlax, but you do start to wonder if the window closes on a play like taking out those Archeops, as Matthew could just go and try to find that Manaphy.
Feeling confident at least that potentially knocking out these attackers, since there isn't really the one trade potential coming out from Matthew's end where there's no one prize attackers, that if I can just get ahead here with taking the 2, it could be fine. So that Snorlax will be promoted, going to sleep after taking that KO. You deserved it, but actually going to wake up for some more action potentially next turn. Damn.
Yeah, good morning. Oh boy, that's a Lugia.
I mean, that'd wake me up too, like nightmare, like sweats in the middle of the night, seeing this Lugia in the act of getting all powered up. And sure enough, that will be the promotion here. Energy attached onto that, and of course, having the capability to go with those terminals to keep going. But Professor Burnett for supporter for turn, having that capability of throwing just 2 cards from your deck right into your discard. It'll be 2 pieces from that Mewtwo V Union. So if this can be drawn off of the prizes, then Matthew can try and go for that setup.
Yeah, that's certainly an option here. I think if you're Grant, you're just very excited to see this was the supporter of choice for the turn. Matthew has a very small hand at this spot and hasn't really gotten a secondary attacker rolling. It's just going to be this Lugia V-Star for now. And when you see basically a turn off at this point with this supporter of choice, you start to feel a little more comfortable.
It is just only 2 cards left. And the Mewtwo V Union, we'll have to see if you can draw it off the prizes, but I don't know if he did, as the Lugia was able to take the KO onto the Snorlax. So now over on Grant's side, just Comfy into the active and back into the Colress Experiment and doing what Colress Experiment does best to try and get to that magic number 10 in the Lost Zone.
And certainly getting closer as we move on here, we see that they are starting to really flow, and that means that we're going to see less cards in the deck, and maybe that lines up a window for Kyogre to get things rolling. Of course, you want to almost guarantee that that all of the energy cards are going to be lined up in a spot like that if you were going to take a risk like this, and that means we're going to see plenty more Comfeys to help out in that spot.
Yeah, you want to make sure when you go for that Kyogre play that you have as little cards in deck as possible, so you're guaranteed to be getting that number that you need to be going for. Now 10 in Lost Zone and able to draw more cards with this Radiant Greninja, though, to just figure out the plan of attack to try and make sure this Lugia gets stopped. And still no Manaphy. You could have a couple of different options.
We see the finger wiggles happening on Grant's side, and that's when you know that the math is happening. Radiant Greninja going to be drawing through the deck a little more here, finding a lot of resources that could be helpful here. Another scoop up net now.
Yeah, that concealed card, that's such a strong ability, but being able to go for it a second time after the scoop up and throwing the Greninja back down is so nice. Another scoop up net, but this time around it will be for the Comfies to just go for that flower selecting Cramorant into the Lost Zone, as yet again, it'll be scoop up net after scoop up net after scoop up net, but this is what this deck does best. Just as many cards in the Lost Zone as possible, please and thank you.
Are you a left capture energy or right capture energy kind of gal?
I don't know. You can't go wrong with the right one all the time, right? It's called right for a reason.
There you go. That's Grant's going to be making that tough choice, and yes, we see that the deck is certainly thinning down at this stage. It opens up opportunities for Kyogre. You don't always want to go that route. It is dangerous still. You still see the Radiant Greninja is available as an attacker. That could put the damage down onto the Archeops, but that involves double Mirage Gate at this stage, and we see it is looking like 5 cards left in the deck, and there is an energy recycler. Is there ever a world where we get rolling, or do you just start to cash in with the Zekrom here and take your damage when you can?
There's such amazing card drawing potential with this deck, because I swear last time we looked at that deck, it was significantly bigger. Where did it all go? But being able now to throw the Zekrom onto the bench, have a couple of different options. You really do want to make sure that Kyogre is kind of like the last play, because if you're discarding all the cards in your deck, you don't want to all of a sudden find yourself with no cards to draw next turn. So instead, Zekrom being thrown down. Considering there's a Lugia in the active, it does feel kind of nice. Yeah,
being able to deal 260 damage and paralyze the opponent seems really strong, but Kyogre's cool. And we've never seen it on stream, so I always want to hype it up, but sure enough, it's never really correct. You probably want to just cash in on the really cool card that you added to your deck, the Zekrom here that can do so much damage to this Lugia deck. Your opponent has shown almost nothing in hand, it's very unlikely that they'd have a switching effect.
I mean, I don't blame you for wanting to see the cool cards. Both of these players featuring cool cards. I want to see the Mewtwo V Union. I want to see this Kyogre just do insane amount of damage to the bench and throwing away all of these energies. that's the fun of seeing these types of decks with these fun techie cards and how they can be able to play out. Selecting another chance. All right, here's the energy recycler though at this point to start throwing energies back in. So we'll have the energy potential with the Mirage Gate, and maybe in coming turns, maybe you can see that Kyogre.
I've almost given up. It's but
it's okay. My fingers are crossed for you. Okay.
Yeah, I will move on from this. It's fine. The Zekrom will do plenty, and still excited to see that attack coming here, as we are going to see that Mirage Gate now. And Grant has looked at that deck for what, like 6 times this turn already. This is madness to have this much reach.
Mirage Gate after Mirage Gate. I mean, the deck definitely has the energies. Why not make use of this engine and just throw them all down? Another one onto the Zekrom and debating with the second energy onto the Comfy. I mean, that's great for retreat potential. So, I mean, Zekrom only needs the 3 of them. And considering where all the energies have been loaded onto, you can guess and imagine what's happening next with that switch card to throw it into active.
Yeah, we see the promotion here, and that is going to be a Wild Shock, dealing plenty of damage to this Lugia, a little bit to itself, and it's completely understandable here, as we will see the paralysis too, so big against this Lugia build.
That's why the Zekrom's so good into this deck, because the Lugia, I mean, it's really good at setting up, it's really good at throwing these energies, it's really good at dealing some damage, but not really good at the swapping around to get rid of this paralysis. So definitely kind of puts Matthew in a really tough decision here. Looking at the cards in hand, I mean, you're kind of, what do you do here if you're Matthew?
Well, you read Serena and you say, oh, it has 2 effects. Is that Tate and Liza? No, Tate and Liza would have given me a switching out, and this is a dangerous spot now. Quick Ball can at least go and find an additional Pokemon here. Maybe you can get one more big attacker to focus on, but you could even see a world where if you go after a Lugia, that could be knocked out next turn from Grant.
Yeah, we'll just be Quick Ball for a Lugia and a further Quick Ball away that Lugia and just keep going back into the deck. Definitely a really kind of tricky situation. You want to have something out, but that second Quick Ball, gonna grab this Pumpkaboo.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're gonna see the Stampede this game, but it's nice to thin out the deck a little bit, I suppose.
Get it out of there.
It's also nice to maybe have a 1-prize Pokemon to buy some time, but it doesn't really work against a deck like this. There's so many ways to reach the bench with the damage and damage counters that Grant would never be worried about that spot. And yeah, we're just going to see the pitch and draw 5 with the Serena. See some cool cards, but none of them provide a switching out.
Yeah, you're able to grab a Manaphy off of that, and that's about, you have the energy, and attach onto the Archeops. That's a tough position to be in, because that's just followed up with that pass and back to Grant. Yep,
Grant is loving this spot. It looks like the Manaphy helps out as far as not seeing big snipe damage come down, but the real knockout is impressive on the Lugia here, and if you can work that in with the Sableye, have that psychic energy to go, you could remove the Lugia and the Manaphy, maybe set up enough damage on the Archeops, and look to close out on the following turn.
Concealed cards just to grab 2 more over on Grant's end. I mean, the Zekrom, sure, is taking some damage, but you're not really necessarily caring about that. You have the energies on, you have the pressure on, you have the capability of taking this KO. You just have to set up to make sure that you can close it out after, and that's going to be followed up with a Primate Wisdom. Only 1 card left in deck.
We see the Ordinary Rod in hand too, so that means that if the Zekrom were to fall, that could be reached once more. But you expect that to just be a chain of Sableyes at this point that are trying to spread just enough damage to get the job done here. Lugia not liking their spot, as Sableye could certainly take the knockout here and get down to just 1 prize card if Grant sees fit.
Start setting up for the following turn with being able to deal damage counters to more than just the Lugia, but have to make sure you're not putting yourself in a tough position by doing so. Another look at the cards before deciding, yeah, no, this is exactly how I want this to play out. Bring that Sableye into the active and go for that Lost Mine. 12 damage counters and going to be splitting them up between the Lugia and what looks like the Manaphy.
Yeah, if you can remove the Manaphy, that opens up avenues to maybe work in the Kyogre, please. One time.
One time for Kyle, please, Grant. Come on. But instead, here we go. Manaphy out. And now 3 damage counters onto the active Archeops, the one that does have the double turbo energy onto it. But Grant at this point only needs one more prize.
And he does have the Mirage Gate. I can see it.
A little cope. All right.
It could happen. I think that Matthew may understand his spot here. We're going to see the Archeops getting charged up for a Speed Wing, and it does take knockouts, but there's only one prize left on the other side of the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right, I'm already down a game. I'll maybe just play out to see kind of where things can go, and it's going to play down the Marnie to maybe try and trip Grant up a little.
Yeah, shuffle your hand into your deck, draw your deck, which is one card, and see the little bit of your hand. Marnie reads interestingly at the end of games.
But at this point, Grant, with so many in hand, that's all going to go to Autumn, and will have things in hand. I will say, look at there is the Kyogre in hand, keeping the dream alive for you. Okay,
I can see it. This is
it's right there.
I think that Zekrom would probably just get the job done here with weakness and everything being available, but also Sableye could just knock this out too, and these gentlemen know the deal.
I guess we can end this 30 seconds earlier and not go through with the Kyogre. We're all just going to do this the old-fashioned way, the safe way, just take it out the Sableye. Hey, I just want to see the cool cards being played, all right, but Grant Manley taking himself a cool 2-0 victory here in round 3.
Yeah, Matthew having a great time here on stream, flips over those prize cards and has a little laugh about that Mewtwo v Union piece and says, what could have been?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely not the type of card that you want to see get going. Just everything that this Mewtwo v Union does with being able to heal, being able to deal this big damage. You don't want to be sitting across from that as a lost player. I guess any of the players out here. So seeing that it was in the prizes and you didn't have to go up against it at all was certainly a treat.
Yeah, I mean, any deck that has a damage cap is terrified, and we saw that's kind of why Arceus is no longer a big threat in the format anymore. And it was exposed at NAIC. Sander did a great job of saying 200 is not going to be enough. And yeah, Grant has a little bit of reach. He can go over that threshold with a Kyogre, but mainly is just going to be doing that with damage counter placement and attacking the bench. And that was plenty against Matthew. And I mean, we didn't even see the Mewtwo v Union, let's be honest. It was going to be a long road for him to get the job done, and cards just weren't lining up.
Yeah, one of those things that any way to grab it out of the prizes would have potentially been nice. But unfortunately, I mean, the consistent Lugia attacker, maybe in other matchups, was working out a lot better because that does still deal a nice amount of damage and then having Archeops to be able to fall out on. But unfortunately, going up against these Pokemon on Grant's side that all won prizers, where you're not really getting the momentum because Grant has a way to fire back, is just a tough spot.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't line up, and that's why we saw that Mewtwo v Union was often featured in a control deck. You just have that opportunity to play those slower turns, to use those supporters, and sure enough, one turn is taken to use that Professor Burnett. There's a 2-card hand on the other side, and Grant's like, oh, I'm just going to win now. Like, there's no way that you can sacrifice this much tempo and still stay in this prize exchange.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued as the day goes on to see all these different decks and how they're going up against Lugia, because obviously you can see the difference just in Grant's deck alone, and the fact that there's going to be the inclusion of that Zekrom over the Raikou, and other things like that. Make sure that you're all